Is Reform UK the best party for property investors? That is the topic on today's Property Answers. I am joined once again by Sky TV's property elevators, John and Ranjan. How are you today?
Very good.
Very well. I've dressed down today. I've taken a tie off because I don't want to embarrass Ranjan any further.
And John and Ranjan will now be discussing their pledges and policies with Reform. So, far away, Ranjan.
Well, the best party for property investors, I think that's the one I'm going to on Friday night, actually.
You're going
out on Friday?
You're going out on Friday?
Well, they let me out once or twice. But no, I think Reform UK have set an interesting direction of travel. In that, I mean, the big thing is that they want to scrap the unfair Section 24 tax on unincorporated landlords who just have one or two buy-to-lets. I think that's massive. And the other interesting thing is on planning, fundamental reform, more urban redevelopment of brownfield sites and offices and shops in high streets, but also recognising that some areas of the country where values are low, subsidies need to be given to bring into economic use old offices and shops and high streets and that kind of stuff. So there's an interesting direction of travel set, which I think is one which the Tories would have set for themselves probably 20 years ago.
Well, it's very interesting, isn't it, Ranjan? Because actually, Reform are really the Conservatives of 15 years ago. And I was at the conference, Conservative conference, and there's a new group called New Conservatives. And actually, the New Conservatives are really Nigel's and his crowd. Really, they are the same. They're making relatively sensible suggestions, pragmatic ideas of how to get round the social problems we have with housing and all the rest of it.
Why do we need people like Reform? Why is it that the Conservative seems to have moved so far to the left? If you look at today's manifesto and compare it with Ed Miliband's of 2010, and the Conservatives back then were saying that he was a lefty loon, but there's not much between those two manifestos.
What really annoys Conservative donors and association, I was chairman of the Ipswich Association, now I'm president, what really frustrates us is exactly that. If you listen to the two very, very boring leaders, incredibly boring leaders in this election, they both almost are saying the same thing, which is bizarre because you would have thought if they're saying the same thing, why are Labour going to potentially win by a landslide? Because they're actually promising the same thing. Now, the difference is you can believe what the Conservatives are saying, you can't believe what Labour are saying, because how on earth can they afford to do what they want to do if they're agreeing to not put tax up, not VAT up, don't put VAT up and all the rest of it? It doesn't make any sense. However, when you've been in 14 years, really, it's very difficult to win once again. And with Nigel Farage and Reform, they've got a character there. He's charismatic. He's coming up with sensible ideas on the whole. One or two of them probably a bit crackers, but on the whole they're sensible. But of course, if you're never going to get into government, you can come up with all sorts of things. It doesn't really matter, does it? We could form a party, Ranjan, together. That would be nice.
Call it.
Surely. Would we get on enough?
We'll call it a birthday party, I think.
Birthday party. That's probably the best party we could actually have. Yeah.
I think, though, what it does is the smaller parties create a lot of pressure on the main parties. We've got 2 million small private landlords here.
Yes.
And I actually, I do buy-to-let in a professional way, and we have a company and all the rest of it. But I don't see why a geography teacher should have to set up a company just because they want to have one or two buy-to-lets down the road to have as a pension or a backup. Now, those 2 million people have been shafted by this lot.
They haven't been shafted, Ranjan. You know exactly why. You're not being honest. You don't know exactly why those people need to form a company, because half of them weren't paying any tax.
Oh, that's not fair.
They weren't paying tax. They weren't paying the tax they should, so the government said, look, we've had enough of this. Have a company, that way you have to do return once a year and pay your tax.
I think that's...
You've paid all your tax, I've paid all my tax. Why on earth should these people get away with it?
Because I actually think that is a very different end of the market, and I think that end of the market which is doing cash in hand is still doing cash in hand. I'll tell you something, if you're a geography teacher and you've got a 2-bedroom flat that you're renting out to a professional couple, you're not going to get a professional couple as tenants who are going to go to the bank, withdraw a bunch of cash and pay it to you.
I'm not saying...
They're going to want standing orders, direct debits,
Ranjan,
receipts, all of that.
You misunderstand what I'm saying.
You don't get people like that as professional tenants.
I accept that. I'm not talking about cash. What I'm talking about, at the end of the year when they do their tax return, they're not putting down the correct amount, or if they've sold the property, they're not paying capital gains on it. That is what's wrong, and that's cheating the rest of us who have been doing it professionally and properly for 40 years.
I would like to see the stats on that, because a lot of these people use letting agents. Letting agents, it's well known, everyone knows that letting agents have to, I mean, ran a lettings agency, we've had to file returns to the tax authorities to tell them who we're managing properties for. Yeah. So that information is all out there. So there's no evading that.
Well, do you know what I think Labour will do? I think they'll force the solicitors to collect the tax when that property's sold. Capital gains.
Straight away.
Straight away. Yeah. Happens abroad a lot. Any money you like. That's one way. One thing they may well do.
Well, that is interesting because they do it with SDLT. But I think I'm not sure. Going back,
Nigel won't, will he? Nigel won't.
But going back to the reform policy on scrapping this Section 24 tax.
Great idea. I do.
With 2 million small landlords, I think there'll be a lot of people that will be saying, "Look, that puts a tick in my box," and that will put pressure on the.
He talks a lot of common sense. And they're talking about him sort of having 15% of the vote. Unfortunately, it won't lead to any actual. Might lead to him getting in. In fact, fun enough, he's standing in Clacton. I've got quite a few flats in Clacton. I've got development happening there shortly as well. And it is very right-wing, Clacton. He's extremely right-wing. He might get in, but no one else will get in. And a lot of his, certainly where we are in Ipswich, we're up against some lunatic as a...
So you're saying it won't be much of a party if he's the only one there?
He'll be the only one. He'll be the only one. And the problem is the depth and quality of the people standing in these towns is poor. And one of the reasons they think that the Conservatives went early, because Rishi, I thought end of November like everyone else for the election, was because Reform weren't organised with all their, all the people they want to stand. They want to stand someone in every seat, all 600 seats.
Oh, you think that was the reason?
And that's one of the reasons they weren't. We think Rishi went early. We can't think of any other reason. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Okay, that's an interesting theory. I haven't heard that one before. I actually think that even if it's a small handful of seats or whatever, it's that percentage of the vote that puts pressure on the two main parties to take note.
What I do think...
With the direction of travel.
I think if Nigel gets in and there's a decent majority who vote, say 15% of the electorate vote for Reform, then I think he because he's so vocal and he's so well known, if he gets in the House of Commons, I think he will cause some trouble. And I think that can only be good for landlords. I would agree with you there. That can only be good for landlords if Nigel gets in. But as a party, they've got no chance.
Actually, that's a good point. I would like to see him stand up, and he will stand up in Parliament.
Oh, he'll stand up.
Defending our interests.
Look what he did in Europe. European Parliament.
Definitely. I think the other area that Reform have some interesting policy on is reforming the planning system.
Well,
I mean, everyone's talking about reforming the planning system. Yes. That's fine. But I think what's interesting in there is that he's talking about repurposing old offices and
haven't the Conservatives done that?
Shops, then? Yes, they have.
Oh, have they? Really?
What they are talking about is adding some incentives in lower value areas.
They're called grants.
Where repurposing
They're called grants. And the government have been giving grants out, and local authorities have been grants out in these areas for years and years and years. Not enough.
Not enough, yeah.
Not enough grants.
No, I accept that grants are available. I think there's a difference between an incentive and a grant. A grant is one of those things where we have X pounds available. When it's gone, it's gone. Apply for it, kind of thing. Where an incentive is, you do this and you will get this incentive. There's a direct correlation. So for a developer, you can plan on that basis. I can buy this site knowing I qualify for this incentive.
Yes, I agree. A quick tip on grants. Get your grants in before April, because April's when they all get their money,
Okay.
and it's probably all
Yes.
gone by June. So
Brilliant.
if you do a grant, get it in before April.
For April.
Yep.
And you said, so in answer to the question, so is Reform UK the best party? You say no, but Nigel is the right person.
Well, that's true. So
Yeah.
yes, I'm in a difficult position here. Officially, can
why
I
I said
talk
it.
officially as president of Ipswich Association,
Understood.
Conservatives? The Conservatives are in the best place to help and deal with developers and landlords, although you may not think so. In the last few years with Michael Gove as housing secretary, he's gone now, thank goodness. However, I do have sympathy for the position of Nigel Farage and Reform. How's that? Is
That's
that well
a
said?
wonderful answer.
Thank you.
I don't have to be that diplomatic. I think the Conservatives when you say are they good for developers and landlords, I think the policy direction at the moment seems very good for very big developers and the very big landlords that want to emerge,
Yeah.
like Lloyd's Bank, Asda, all these
all the
other,
big boys,
all these
yeah.
big people, and some institutions that are coming from abroad. But what about the smaller investor? The smaller buy-to-let investor, the smaller developer.
I totally
For
agree,
that,
Ranjan. And actually,
Nigel
like
in the
you
House
said,
of Commons would be great.
yeah, 2.5 million of them, private landlords, all who would normally vote Tory.
Yes.
How
yes.
many of them are going to vote Reform? Perhaps I don't
Perhaps
know how.
we can ask viewers as well.
Perhaps the viewers would like to comment on that. How many of them who would normally vote Tory are thinking of voting Reform?
There we go, viewers. If you are,
There you go.
yeah, please.
There's
let us
no
know your
prize.
thoughts.
There's no prize,
No prize.
unless Ranjan's going to put one up, which I doubt.
But you know what? I mean, there is an argument to say, well, you know, if you, I mean, there could be some tactical voting here. I mean, if you, like I voted, I will freely admit, I've never voted for any other party than Tory. But I do not feel comfortable voting Labour.
But-
So if the Tories are not going to form the government, perhaps adding to Reform's share of the vote to say, I agree with this direction of travel,
Yes.
then puts pressure on policy over the next few years.
What I would say, finally, is that if I can have the final say for a change.
Of course.
Thank you.
She does, I think.
A vote, yeah. A vote for Reform is a wasted vote, really, unless you're in Clacton,
Okay.
where Nigel is. It's a wasted vote. And actually, if we're looking at a situation where Labour are going to have a massive majority if we're not careful, then it will take over 5 years for the Tories to get back in. So really, you want to keep voting Tory in order for them not to be a massive mountain to climb in 5 years' time.
Don't you think a massive Labour majority would be a good thing? Rather than getting in with the skin of the teeth?
No majority would be a good thing.
Okay, if faced between those two alternatives, here's my logic, right? With a thin majority...
I was going to have the last word, wasn't I?
No, she's going to have the last
last
word.
word.
Oh,
You have
right,
the second
okay.
to last word.
With a thin
Third last word.
with a thin majority,
Yeah.
then Keir Starmer is going to have the same old infighting dealing with the momentum wing and the loony lefts. But with a thumping majority, he has a little bit of a mandate to be more Tony Blair, Peter Mandelson,
Yeah.
if he wants to, because he can control those loonies.
But it will take 10 years then for Tories to get back in because there's such a big mountain to climb. That's the problem.
That'll happen anyway, no?
Well, there we go. I'm going to leave you guys to talk amongst yourself for
Fight
that
it
one.
out.
Yeah, squabble.
To squabble on this one. Thank you so much for watching here at Property Answers. We would love to hear your comments, so do write below. More property answer questions coming very soon, so stay tuned.